And now with the Peacock release, as we talk about on the show in depth, the music isn't there. Some of the music's there, but most of the music has been replaced. Now, what we learned subsequently from our show buddies from Homicide Life on the Set, not Homicide Life on Repeat, our show, that in the UK and elsewhere outside of America, they never had the original music because it was too expensive to export.
This is Cooper's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Cooper's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. I got to tell you, people, the first 3 episodes, first of all, I want to thank Jimmy Corhan and Comedy Trainwreck, but the first 3 episodes were comedians I know who are now, the national headliners who write and they have TV writing jobs or they act and they still do comedy. But the gentlemen on my show today, they aren't comedians, but they are very funny, but they're actors and they've both been on my show, Cooper Talk, a few times. And they have a podcast about the show they co-starred in called Homicide Life on the Street. And their podcast is called Homicide Life on Repeat. And my guest is Kyle Secor and Reed Diamond. How you doing, guys?
Steve,
that was awesome.
That was awesome. Thank
that
you.
was awesome.
Go ahead, Kyle, because I know you got this one. Go for it.
Yeah, no, that was the best. That was great information about both of us. That's all I have to say.
That's always, we're not comedians, but we're hilarious. And our show is called Homicide Life on Repeat. And dude, we know you so well. We're honored to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to tell you something about your show because I'm going to make a full confession here. Okay. I do not listen to podcasts. I host 3 podcasts. I don't listen to any of my own shows.
Interesting.
The only time I listen to a show, and sadly, is when a guest passes away. And then I sit there, I'll have a glass of wine, and I'll listen to that episode. That's the only time I listen. So I don't.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt for Cooper? Steve Cooper, can I interrupt for 1 second? Do you you listen to your own podcast if one of your guests pass away, or just a regular podcast if someone passes away?
One of my guests passed away. Like when Polito, we'll get to jump. When Polito passed away, I listened to it. But that's the only time I listen because it's a remembrance of them.
Right.
Like Willie Garson did my show twice, and when he passed, I listened to that. But I came home I was doing a private comedy show 2 Saturdays ago, and I came home and I put you guys on YouTube. And I watched your first episode. Right. And then today I listened to your second episode on my little Alexa, and I really enjoy it. You guys do a good job. You banter off each other and you give a lot of information. So my question is, how did you guys choose each other to host together? How did this whole show come about? Because it's a long path. You have 130 something episodes you have to do. So it's not like you're doing every episode. So how did it all come about, and how did you guys choose each other?
Well, we didn't choose each other. Tom Fontana chose us, and he put us together on the same television show.
And he said, 30 years from now, you'll be doing a podcast with each other. Exactly. Just have me on the show a couple times at least.
I mean, really, Steve, the hilarious part is like, look, the beauty of this show is that it was like the creative high point of all of our lives. But what's crazy about it is we were all like slightly, and I hate to use any sort of psychological terms, but we were like slightly traumatized all by it. But the secret is that we all thought we had that experience alone. And so it was the 30th anniversary, and there's a great other podcast called Homicide Life on the Set, and they had brought Kyle on, and I'd heard some other people, and I just worked with our DP Jean de Segonzac earlier in the year, and I was thinking this, but like it had occupied. Literally, homicide lives in my brain. But I'm going to make a long story short. So then Kyle started a small little, he was doing a Substack. So he had a little podcast adjacent to that. He's like, can I come on? Will you come on my podcast? I was like, of course, Kyle, I loved you. And Kyle and I, the one thing that's beautiful about Homicide is however prickly it was on the day when we were all there, anytime we see each other afterwards, it's a love fest. And so Kyle and I wouldn't say that we were friends, but we weren't close when we did the show. But every time we saw each other after the show, we were always very close. We often see each other at yoga, or we're wandering down the streets on Riverside Boulevard after
in our yoga gear.
In our fully in our yoga gear, and that could be bicycle shorts, whatever you want to imagine.
Whatever you want to, yeah.
But Kyle brought me onto his gorgeous show, and it was wonderful to talk to someone else the way he did on Homicide Life on the Set, to talk to someone. It's run by Susan, who was our first AC, and a lovely gentleman, Chris Carr, a British fan filmmaker. But then to talk to someone in your sort of group and share those stories, it has another layer of intimacy and another layer of revelation and another layer of fun. So after we did that, Kyle was like, we should do a podcast. I'm like, yeah, I'll do a podcast with you, man, because that sounds like a lot of fun. And he goes, we should do a rewatch podcast because it's re-airing on Peacock. And I go, I don't know much about rewatch podcasts, but let's do it. And here we are 2.5 months later. And I got to tell you, and Kyle will tell you more, and I'm going to shut up because I can be quite long-winded, as Kyle knows. It's been a freaking journey. It's been an odyssey. Kyle and I, like when Kyle's face popped up right now on the thing, I was like, oh, I'm safe. Like Kyle and I have fallen in love over the last 2.5 months, and we knew each other, but like we have gone like I get more texts from Kyle than I get from my wife, and we talk to each other the first thing in the morning. We talk all day, and we've been recording this thing. We're learning how to do it, and we'll talk about it more. But the beauty of it is, I thought a rewatch podcast was, whatever. They exist. I wasn't sure that's the kind of thing, per your statement, Steve, that something you want to listen to. But how this has evolved in that very homicide way, it's a rewatch podcast, but it's really more. It's a conversation about art, and it's a conversation about a period of filmmaking. It's a conversation about another era, and it's a conversation about love and trauma and remembrance. And that's all I'm going to say right now.
Well, what I'll say real quick is when Homicide was on the first time, I didn't really watch it a lot. It was so long ago. I think I was doing stand-up at the time, so I was never home.
Right.
And now I just started watching it on Peacock. So I'm only through season 3. So you're not on yet. Mike Kellerman's not on yet.
No.
But I through 3. So I really appreciate it because I've watched these in the last few weeks. So it's good to hear you describing the episodes.
Yeah.
I know when Kyle, when you were on Cooper Talk, you had told me about the episode of you 3 guys in the box.
Right.
Okay. And then I watched it and I was blown away, and I was like, holy shit, he is right. It is like a play, and it was crazy. But now Reed, you said Kyle's going to tell me something. So Kyle, what are you going to say, how the podcast started, how this all jived together?
Oh yeah. I called Reed and he said, yes. Yeah. That's really it.
Yeah.
And because we had such a great connection doing this interview that I did for this Substack thing, I'm going to be a little more terse.
Yeah. Sorry, you could tell, you could feel like we're in this period of our romance that's very intense because it's really gone a long way. And Kyle and I just saw each other in person for the first time in 14 years. A week ago today. Yeah. So we're still giddy from that. But we literally we see each other this way. Like this is how we relate through whatever these 3 panels or through whatever.
Why had it been 14 years? Because you lived, I know you moved around, I know you lived in that, but when you think, because you guys did work together, and what people don't get is when you work on a TV show and you're a few years together, the whole crew, everyone as you talk about in the show, gets very close. So that you would keep in touch, but you guys did you ever try to hook up and say, hey?
No. We were in touch when we used to live in the same neighborhood. I used to live in Kyle's neighborhood, and we'd see each other all the time. We had similar interests. We did yoga, and we liked to shop at Trader Joe's. So we'd see each other in that period. But then I left LA 14 years ago. I moved up to wine country 2.5 hours north, and I was very rarely in Los Angeles. And then I moved to Canada for a brief period of time, and now I'm moving to New England. But it's so we just, whenever we saw each other, it was incredibly affectionate and very intimate, because there's an intimacy that we liken to, and I don't want to speak for Kyle, but it's like we both were in the war together. And so there's we were in the same platoon. And so
I had actively spent a lot of time forgetting about the platoon. Yes. I'd spent so seeing Reed was a great thing to see, but I wasn't actively staying in touch with people, and there was specific reasons for that, just because it had been pretty intense. But then, seeing Reed this year, it just kind of opened up the floodgates, and I'd already been writing about it. And then when he said yes to me, I went, thank God, and he was fully in. That's the great thing about Reed is he's like, he just jumps the hell into the ship and says, we're going for it. Okay, great. And he's also just the DIY guy. He can do just about anything, and so much more than I can do. I've learned an awful lot, but that's what we're doing. And Steve, you know what it's like, putting together a podcast and doing a lot of stuff on your own. And it's a lot of effort. And Reed is the guy who I would, he's beside me all the way doing this. And I couldn't have a better soldier with me.
Now, this show wouldn't have happened.
Steve, can I just jump in one second? Because he said something really cool. Yeah. Kyle's like, he said this something really great, like, and you can cut this out or not use it, but like, what's great about Homicide people, you said it perfectly. We didn't want to talk about it, but so if you ran into somebody, and it would always be random. I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then Alex Jusefsky, my second DP, your third DP, came in, and we caught each other in the aisle as we're sitting down, and we just hugged and loved and talked, because when you see each other, you don't want to talk about it, but when you see each other, you're so intimate. And then I got to work with him on Bosch. But it is funny, you said this, as Kyle always does. Kyle is a deep and articulate thinker. It's so true. Like, exactly. We didn't seek it out, but we needed it. And when we do connect, it's profound, and it's sort of it's fiocchi. Oh no, what is it? Fiocchi. Are you, Steve? You're not Italian, are you? How do you say fireworks in Italian?
No, my wife is. I'm not.
Okay,
big
there you go.
Bang.
Anyway, big bang. Fiocchi di fiore.
So it came out on Peacock. Now that's one of the reasons why you just probably the only reason why you started a show, because it came out on Peacock. But were you guys excited when you found out it was coming out on Peacock? Was that something you looked forward to? Because you were on the show. Now it's 30 years ago, so your career, you're completely different places in your life. You're older. You both still have great hair.
Thank you
but
so
that's
much.
just you both have really good hair.
We do.
But no. So were you excited when you heard it was coming out? Was that something that you were like, oh yes, or were you like, yeah, like as you said, it was traumatic. So you were like, this is going to add to the pain. This is like I have PST plan. How was it? What were you feeling, Reed? What was your feeling when you heard it was coming out?
We were really excited because, and this is one of the things, because whatever whatever intensity of making the show, because with all of these creative people, there were big personalities, and it created a very interesting environment. But no, I don't think, I think Kyle and I agree on this, that for me, it was the height of my artistic life. Like, there's nothing, I will measure everything I do after that or before it by my experience on Homicide. And Mike Kellerman was the greatest character I ever had the joy to play. And I know how Kyle feels about Tim Bayless, and the fact that like people could finally see it, because what was so weird was that it was sort of embargoed, that there was this period where unless you had collected the DVDs, and as Kyle and I've talked about, we have multiple iterations of those DVDs. If you didn't have them, you couldn't see that show. And that was a crime against humanity. Now, the reason for this embargo was the music, because one of the things, at least for American viewers, was the music was sort of essential to the show, and to get those rights was very expensive, or nay, impossible. And now with the Peacock release, as we talk about on the show in depth, the music isn't there. Some of the music's there, but most of the music has been replaced. Now, what we learned subsequently from our show buddies from Homicide Life on the Set, not Homicide Life on Repeat, our show, that in the UK and elsewhere outside of America, they never had the original music because it was too expensive to export. So, but go ahead. Sorry, go Kyle. I can feel it.
Oh, it's good. We have that communication now. So what I was going to say was, I had known that it was coming down the pike for some time. I had my ear to the tracks. And so when I'd been writing the Substack, and I thought, man, it's going to come, and what are we going to do? It's going to be on a streaming platform. And, we struck last year for some streaming for some of the actors to get some better deals with the streaming. And I thought, let's just do something. Let's do this. Let's do a rewatch. I didn't know what it was either. And even if we get an extra 1,000 eyes on the screen, or 2,000 eyes on the screen, or whatever, the people that were involved, the actors that are still around, and some of the other people, we might get a few extra shekels along with that. And also, so many people want to know so much more about this show. It means a great deal to a lot of people, like far more than I ever knew it did. It's pretty phenomenal. Go ahead, Steve.
And you know what a lot of people don't know is the first episode. Well, you guys know, but the first episode aired after the Dallas Buffalo Super Bowl. So it had huge viewership that first year, that first episode, and everyone always stayed around and watched it. Yeah. As you know, me and you have talked about it, Kyle, about the beginning, the opening sequence. Tell me about the opening sequence, because the dog and the shooting. I mean, do you guys look at back and go, man, this is really innovative? Because that's over 30 years ago, and that's just a different kind of. It's not like the the singing and like John Stamos and Bob Saget and
dude.
We had John Stamos for this, didn't we, Reed?
Oh my God! Well,
he was. Yes. He was with the dog originally.
He did the bongos.
Yeah. I still watch it. I still watch every episode with that lead in. I can't do the show without seeing that lead in. That's just completely sets the mood. I think that it was put together so beautifully.
And what we stress on the show, which is hard, one of the things that we do with this rewatch podcast on our me and Kyle, is that we set the stage, the context of. You have to understand that in 1993, when this premiered on January 31st after the Super Bowl, that network television was 3.5 networks. You had NBC, ABC, CBS, and the fledgling Fox. And so people weren't trying to create TV that was going to be challenging or different. They were trying to get as many eyeballs as they possibly could onto that set. And so to make a handheld French New Wave, American New Wave independent movie on television with a title sequence in black and white that didn't have a theme song or show your lead actors, that was intentional, but it was radical. Now, the thing that we really sort of try to put the exclamation point on is that now this looks like TV that was made this week. But it changed television fundamentally.
How you view it, how we view it, how we look at anything.
And how it looks, and how so it wasn't made. It wasn't user friendly. It wasn't in television, as Kyle and I talk about every week. A regular television show doesn't want to offend you. It wants to lay the plot out. It's plot. It resolves at the end. Homicide, well, I mean, Kyle's most famous case didn't get solved. And that is essential to that show. And also people can die and people can leave. And that's not what network television did at the time. You knew your leads were going to get the bad guy by the end, and they were going to survive for all 27 seasons.
And here's also Barry Levinson, Tom Fontana, and they came on and they just went, we want the biggest free. They were artists, and they came and they said, we're going to use stuff from the French New Wave. We're going to use, all sorts of different techniques, and we're not going to spend a lot of money, and we're just going to use a light that is a Chinese lantern to light the scenes, and let's just see what happens if you have ultimate freedom and you throw it on the screen. And what happened was this brilliant, groundbreaking thing and what Reed and I get to break down is the toxicity of the environment that it was happening in. But yet the incredible joy and heartache and everything that was thrown up on the screen and off the screen. And it was all just an amazing period of time.
Now you, Kyle, you didn't want to do TV. Tell me about that. I know you wanted to be a movie star, because back then people did TV or movies. I mean, how did you end up ending up on Homicide? Because that wasn't your goal.
Yeah, I don't know if I wanted to be a movie star. I just thought that movies were just a better way for me to work, that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it was very clear. It was like, however many months, and it was packed together. TV for me didn't seem logical, that you're going to be on something for a long period of time and keep coming back over and over again and doing the same character. So that's just the reason why I didn't want to do it. I thought film was just a better style for me. But man, that changed.
Yeah, totally.
So how did you end up with the role?
I'm sorry, say that again. Sorry.
How did you end up getting the part?
Yeah, a casting director named Lou DiGiamo had brought me in. I'd worked with Tom Fontana on St. Elsewhere, and I came in. I said I didn't want to do it. I was going to go over to Germany and do an acting workshop with beach balls and people that wouldn't marry me. And I came back to LA, and they said they still want to see you. I said I don't want to do this, but I'll go in for this character. And it was Beau Felton, which was the Danny Baldwin role. And I said I'm so not right for this. And I went in, I read it, and I went, I was so not right for that. And they said, we want you to come in again. We want another character. And I came in, and it was for this character named Tim White. And I walked in, and there was Barry and Tom together. And I said, am I reading? They said, no, we want you to do the role. And that's a dream for an actor. As Reed has said to me, yes, that doesn't happen much.
It doesn't happen. to get the role in the room. It only happened to me once. It happened literally on my first legitimate job, and it was so impactful. But like when Kyle told me that story, because he told me that story, because the beauty of this too is we don't prepare in a way. We talk about we know the episode we're gonna talk about. We don't plan anything. It's fully improvisational. So. And I'm such a fan of the show, such a fan of Kyle and all the actors. So it's great to learn these stories in real time. So to hear the first time we talked, the first episode we did, that he got the job in the room. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, and that bastard, that Tom Fontana. Also, another thing is that he knew I didn't want the job when I was in the room. I'm like, because my body position is like moving back out towards the door, except for Barry Levinson is there, and Tom went on. Well, I got to.
Do you think he offered it to you just to mess with you?
This is because I've told you this. Is that he dangled that 6th episode out in front of my face,
right.
The 3 guys in the room, and you do that to an actor who loves the stage or who loves anything and goes, we're going to put 3 guys in a box and it's just going to be us. I'm in. I don't care what happens after that. I don't think this series is going to go because it probably sounds like it's going to be too good, but I've got to do that episode. And that's why I got on board. That's truly, and Tom dangled that in front of me. And
that's my dream right now, is that perversely, the reason you got that part is because he knew you didn't want it. And he's like, you're going to get it in the room. Wouldn't that be great?
I will ask him.
I mean, so beyond your talent, obviously.
Well, thank you.
Now, Reed, how did you end up on this show? Because you came in later. I know you were in Memphis Bells and you were doing some other stuff, right? That was your first role, Memphis Bells.
Memphis Bells was my first, after my after-school special. I did get my after-school special, Date Rape.
What was your after-school special? I got to hear this.
Date Rape. So that was the first job I got in the room. And so, long story short, I knew I was always going to be an actor, but I also kind of wanted to go to college. So I went to college for a little while. And what I would do is in the summer, I'd be an actor in the summer. So I'd do commercials. And then I went to Juilliard. And to pay for Juilliard, I would have to do something to pay for that year. So the first year before I got Juilliard, I did a Subaru commercial that paid for the first 2 years. But after my first year, I got my first legitimate job. We used to call that legitimate back in the day when it wasn't commercials. And it was an ABC after-school special. And I'd always wanted to be in an ABC after-school special because, of course, you came home from school and you watched ABC school. And so mine was called Date Rape. And that's because we didn't know that date rape was a thing. This is 1988. And unfortunately, I was the date raper. But, and I date raped Danielle von Zernick, who had been in La Bamba. And she was a lovely, lovely woman. And, but for me, the highlight of that too was I got to work with one of my idols, John Savage, was in that.
Oh my God.
John, right? Duh.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, you know, exactly. John Savage, Deer Hunter, it goes on. And one of the greatest actors of all time. And so, and lots of great actors. John Carlin, who was on Cagney and Lacey, played Tyne Daly's husband on Cagney and Lacey, and he played my dad. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. Blah, 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 blah. So that was my ABC after school special. And then after my second year of Juilliard, during my second year of Juilliard, I'd gotten Memphis Belle. So I left to do Memphis Belle for the summer, and then I came back a little bit later and finished school there. But the way I came to Homicide is I watched it on January 31st, 1993, with 19 to 20 million Americans right after the Super Bowl. And I was so excited to watch it because as you may know, you and I may have talked about this, Steve, before, but I got to Los Angeles after I left New York, and I came to LA, and I thought, I'm going to become a cop because I don't think what I'm doing is real. I had sort of this weird sort of existential crisis, like being an actor, does that matter? And then I went on a ride along in Watts, and I befriended some cops, and all the cops I met all wanted to be actors. And I realized what I'm really meant to do is be an actor and play a cop truthfully on television and the movies at the time. And so I read everything there was to read on it. I was preparing to play a cop, and, hopefully Sidney Lumet was going to call or something was going to happen. And then I knew that Homicide was airing, and I was so excited about it because I'd gone to school with Andre. I'd gone to Juilliard with Andre. I knew Andre. I was a first-year student in his fourth year Othello. I watched him multiple times blow the world away. He was a star already at Juilliard, and I learned a lot and made my two best friends because we were just spear carrier Cypriots in his Othello. But I was excited about the show because Barry, obviously, as a director, that seemed amazing that he was bringing a television show. But for me, I've always been a character actor and possibly not a character actor's body. Like that's always been my dream. So Ned Beatty and Yaphet Kotto and John Polito were my heroes. And those were, so I thought they're on TV and they're doing a cop show. So I literally, as Kyle and I have talked about, I'm not a sports person, but I suffered through the Super Bowl to wait because I didn't want to miss any of Homicide Life on the Street. And I was
Dallas
sitting in.
Won.
What? Well,
Dallas won.
And don't they always win? I don't know.
Buffalo wasn't that time.
Literally all I know about the Dallas Cowboys are the cheerleaders because I am a child of the 70s, but and they may not even have them. They might be cheer people at this point.
No, they're still there.
Are they still there? Thank God. Well, that's wonderful. But I watched that show at the Sutton Place. It wasn't even the Sutton Place, the famous Actor Hotel in Vancouver. It was called Le Méridien. It hadn't even graduated to the Sutton Place, even though it was chock full. It was pilot season. It was chock full of actors, and
you met everyone in the elevators. Everyone.
The bar was insane because I remember I was doing this pilot for NBC called Boy Meets Girl, and it was an amazing pilot back when they did 2-hour pilots. It was me and Jasmine Guy. We were the leads, and Al Freeman Jr., who appeared on Homicide, was in it. Amazing actors were in this thing. But we're staying at the Le Méridien, which became the Sutton, and we go down to the bar, of course, and everyone would walk through. So there'd be James Wood doing whatever he's doing, and then Sade would come through, and Jasmine got. It was just everyone you knew. Anyway, blah blah blah. So I'm sitting there in my room at the Le Méridien, the Sutton Place, and I watch this pilot, and I'm blown away. And as Kyle and I talk about all the time, at first it was so jarring because it was so radical. We're so used now to seeing independent film techniques and film techniques on television, but to have the handheld and to have the jump cuts and to have the lines being crossed, it was so radical. And I just sat there and I go, oh God, I have to be on this show. So I literally, the fuse was lit and I dreamed of being on the show. And then, so long story short, 3 years later, I guess, I got the audition for Homicide for this character, not thinking, we'll get to that. But, and he had a different name. He was Mike something, like Callahan or something. It wasn't Kellerman yet. But I thought, if they will take a guy who looks like me, at the time I had blonde hair, it's all gray now, but I had blue eyes. Because when I auditioned for everything in the early 90s, everything that I went up for in the breakdowns, do you know what the breakdowns are?
Yeah.
Yeah, the casting breakdowns, right? So they have a description of the
character. I like a real quick story about that. I was in a Calvin Harris video, and I auditioned for a creepy guy. I got it from my thing. And the funny thing is, I get cast as creepy guy. But what makes it worse is another guy is creepier guy. So I'm creepy. So I walk in, and you think you have a certain, like, oh yeah, I'm all right. And you look around, and you go, holy shit, my agent thinks I look like this.
Well, he was creepier guy.
The worst thing would be is you didn't get creepy guy. We want you to audition for creepier guy. That would be the worst.
That's it.
Well, we're upping you.
The worst, creepiest guy.
Yeah, the creepiest guy.
Yeah. Stalker, pervert, pedophile. That would be the worst. But so you get the breakdown.
So I get the breakdown, and it said everything that I read for in the early 90s. It said a Johnny Depp type. We're looking for a Johnny Depp type because that was the icon, that was the signature of that period, and I am the apotheosis of a Johnny Depp type. In fact, I had to leave New York as a New York actor because people were like, "Where are you from? Are you from Nebraska? Are you from Iowa?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm freaking here. I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up here in Manhattan." But like, "No, you're not. So you need to get out of here." Like, so I didn't have.
You're one of those corn-fed New Yorker boys.
I look like one of those corn-fed New Yorkers. So I go, "Oh my God, okay." They wanted a Johnny Depp type for the Kellerman role or whatever it was called at the time. But I thought, if they're going to take a guy like me, this is my part, because the scene was brilliant. It was one scene in the box. It was a 2-page interrogation scene, which is also this is the hallmark of great directors, writers, creators, if they don't give you a ton of material, because they can tell, you can tell right away if you're the guy or you're not the guy. That's always my shtick. I'm like, no, you're the guy or you're not the guy. But anyway, I show up in Burbank at the campus of NBC, and they had a sort of satellite building that was just for casting, epic building, and it is packed. It is packed with everyone that you know to this day, and they all want this part. And I'm like, okay, I think this is my part. And then it turned out I got it, and then I got that, I got through the first hurdle, and then I had to go meet Tom and Barry at Lou Giacomo's office. And Lou Giacomo, as you guys mentioned, he cast The Godfather. He's no slouch, and it went quite well. I asked to do it again because I was like, I think,
Love it.
I think I can do it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But my joke about this is, it only occurred to me just in the last few years. I was like, oh, I was hired for a different reason than I thought, because in my mind, I've been preparing to play this guy. I almost became a cop. I've been preparing to play this character for 3 years, but I was just brought on to be a piece of ass, like to be the kissy face, the cheesecake. Because I had a manager for a long time. Because up until Homicide, I was only doing kissy face. I was only playing boyfriends, and I hated it. I would just be I'd be on every TV movie, being Tori Spelling or whoever was boyfriend. I'd be like the good guy who thought was the bad guy, or the bad guy who thought was the good guy, and I'd have to do kissy face. And I just remember going to my manager at the time after I'd seen the Homicide pilot. I go, I want to play a cop, and she's like, you're not going to. You got a lot more kissy face to do. No one's going to give you a gun. And I was like, I want a gun. But I got the gun, but I think I was brought there for kissy face. But then, the beauty of it was, I had been preparing for 3 years to play a cop on television, and beauty of the show, which Kyle and I talk about all the time, is there's a transference. There is an alchemy between the actor and the creators, and things evolve. So Kyle, as I watched very epically while I was there, he would influence where he wanted Tim to go quite overtly. And I just was I remember I just thought, Kellerman should be this guy. Like, no, I don't want him to have a successful relationship. I don't want to do kissy face. Anytime they'd write me a kissy face scene, I'd call up poor suffering Julie Martin, who I hope we have on the show soon. And I was like, I don't want to do the kissy face. It can't be, if Kellerman's going to be in a relationship, it has to be a bad relationship, because he's a mess, and he's a sweet guy, and he's in love, and he's picking all the wrong women. So long story short, that's how I got into Homicide.
I will say one thing, and it's a ballsy thing for actors to do. It's a ballsy thing for an actor to say, I'd like to do that scene again. Because if you don't bring something big and different that second time around, you've just wasted their time. You know what I'm saying? So it sounds as though you brought something, Reed.
Well, it's funny. No, it's actually even sillier than that, because I already had the job, and I went back in there. I was just nervous, and I was so excited to do it. And they were, because when I came in, I was like, Barry and Tom are so sweet. Okay, can I just do it one more time? And they're like, yeah, come on, man, come on in. And clearly, I already had the gig, and I was like, yeah, because I was just a little like in my head the first time. Let me do it again. It was a fait accompli at that point. But yes, what you say is true. I don't think I was ballsy. I think it had already happened. I think this was just like, let's make sure he's not a dick.
Yeah.
I think that was just my screening for dick.
Now, what was it like when you went on the set? Because Kyle, you've been there since the beginning, and now you have this pretty boy kissy face coming on, and you're like, but what was it like for you as a new cast member coming on? Because there is Yaphet Kotto, Kyle's been in there. You love the show, so the characters. It has to be a little overwhelming. What was it like for you? And then Kyle, we'll get to you and see what was it like when Reed came on. What was it like for you when you went on the set?
Well, it was pretty clear. Like, no one was excited to see me. I was really the first new addition to the cast.
Reed.
No, and what I loved about it, because I was so earnest and young. I turned 28 on my first day. It was my 28th birthday, and to be honest, yes, no one was excited to see me. It wasn't very welcome. They'd lost a few guys. Ned and Danny had split, and Polito was gone, and so I was sort of the real first new addition. I mean, Isabella was brought on, but it was just different. I was brought into the squad. So yes, the way I love the coin is no one's excited to see me. The only person who was very pleasant to me right out the gate was Belzer. But even on the first day, I had to do my gallery shots. I had to do my photo shoot with Clark. And I remember his attitude was like, you're not going to be here long. And and it all worked out. But also to me, in my earnestness and I wasn't a method actor, but I also loved whatever the more real it was, the better. And I thought, this is what it would be like if a new guy from arson came on to the homicide squad, no one would welcome him. So I was like, I can use this. And it's interesting. The rewatch has been illuminating and exciting, but also just like profoundly informative, because Kyle, what's hard for maybe someone who's not an actor to understand is we don't remember most of the scenes we shoot. We don't remember the experience. We remember personal interactions. Like I remember dinners I had with Kyle, but I don't remember scenes I had with Kyle, you know. But then when we rewatch it, it was great to see like, oh, we had all this interaction and we're playing with each other. And so whatever was going on, and you have to remember, like everyone's coming through their own psychology and taking everything personally. It was a beautiful and fulfilling experience. Like I see out the gate, Kyle, there's all these great scenes between Kyle and me and Andre, and we're playing with each other, and they're playing and the thing was, everyone was a thoroughbred. And that's what also we have to remember on that show is like there were no slouches. So most of the chaos came from no matter what department you were in, whether you're the creator, the producer, the writer, or the actors, you're dealing with the best of the best. So with that comes a lot of also intense personal dynamics. But so the beauty of rewatching it, besides the fact that I always held it in the highest regard and the height of my creative experience as an actor, is seeing like, oh yeah, we were crushing it. We were doing it out the gate. You know, for me, especially now, because Kyle and I are madly in love. We're work spouses now.
Yeah.
Is to see that, like, because we didn't even remember we had scenes together.
And whether we were on a case together.
We're on a case together. So because it goes by in a flash, because you're doing 22 episodes a season, and they're long hours and they're long days, and very rarely do you remember acting in a scene. So
yeah, here's my overall impression.
What was it like when he came on?
Yeah, my overall impression was get off our set. That was my overall impression. Is I didn't quite know why they had brought him on. Now that started changing almost immediately, like when we started doing the stuff with the fire, with Fire Part 1 and 2, and I realized, oh, he's got, this guy's got chops, and he really loves being here and loves doing this. I still didn't know quite, because on Homicide we were always hungry for storylines, great storylines, and the issue to me, it was always, is some of my storyline going to this guy? Now he's the good looking guy, now I'm the older guy, or whatever. But on the other hand, I could have cared less, because there was a wealth of material to go around and a wealth of good actors there, and we were all going to get our shot at the plate in any given scene. I mean, it could have been as simple as Reed and Andre and I pulling up outside of this van where there's these people screwing inside this van. And that's just a joyous, funny moment that is all three of us, like, there's no ego involved. We're just enjoying being there together, and all of that stuff goes out the window. So I thought it was great having Reed there after that initial shock.
Now, how important to the show, because we talk about the show, it takes place in Baltimore. How important is that show takes place in Baltimore? Because you really get the feel of the city. And, people like, I watched Cold Case, and I had Danny Pino on my show a few weeks ago, the other show, Cooper Talk. And we talked about how they did a few exteriors of Philadelphia, but they shoot it in LA. It's different. But so how important was Baltimore being the backdrop, because it really adds to the grit, because people from back east know Baltimore used to be the murder capital of the world. I mean, it was like, the charm city there, but like, it was just crazy. So how important was it that it was shot in Baltimore for the overall context of how the show has affected people?
I think absolutely 100%. It was you could say that about, in Deliverance or any other thing, that, the locale was the character, and Baltimore was a huge character. I know they wanted to take this thing and they wanted to shoot it in LA, and Tom and Barry said, absolutely not. There's no way you could get the vibe of Baltimore the people that live there, the homes they live in, that, we would go into homes like when I was directing, or we would go into these homes to have them see, listen, do we want to use this home? And you'd look at it and you go, oh my God, yeah, leave it like this. This is unbelievable, because their homes were museums to their eccentricities in a way. So you saw a lot of stuff which almost looked like a museum in all of these different homes, and they would end up sometimes changing everything around. Sometimes they left them as they were, but you couldn't get that in LA. There would be someone having an idea of what something should look on the inside of a Baltimore, row house, and that's just, I don't know. And from the crew, from the people that they pulled from the talent pool around that area, the guest stars on that show, the ones that had small roles, all local people. Some of them never worked again after that. It was just one job, a one-off, but they were unbelievable. And they were part and parcel of Baltimore, of the entire scenario there.
And aesthetically, as Kyle articulated so brilliantly, it's like it was essential because Baltimore's a character to the show. So aesthetically, it looks like no other place, and you're never going to be able to recreate that in Los Angeles, as he said so well. And the other part is creatively, by its isolation. The other thing it's hard to remember is no shows were shot on location in the 90s. So no one from Burbank, no NBC executive was going to show up on that set because they don't want to go to Baltimore. They might go to New York, but they're not going to Baltimore. So you had this license. As long as the show was turned in on time and under budget, the madness that did occur could occur because they didn't know. No one's going to say like, oh, we can't find one of our actors for 5 days because he's on a bender. As long as he got his scenes shot and it got delivered to Burbank and NBC, they were none the wiser. So it created this atmosphere. And also because we were in this cauldron together. I mean, my first year there, I lived 2 blocks from the studio. So my day was wake up, go to the studio, or not the studio or whatever. I'd go there, start my day, shoot all day. And then all of us went across the street and drank at the same place, drank all night, went home, started again. It was a triangle, and then eventually some of us got sober, some of us moved away. We had to like break the chain, but it was a very insular experience. It was like being on location, but being on location in the way that movies used to be made. In the old days, they just send everyone off to do the John Frankenheimer movie, and you'd go to Afghanistan for 9 months. But now that's what's so sexy, and that's the reason, one of the reasons Kyle and I want to do this podcast is because this was a different time. And also, even at the time when we were making it, it harkened back to an even earlier time. There were vestiges and the imprimatur and the heritage of older filmmaking in
John Waters.
Yes, John Waters, and having
Huge.
Jimmy Finnerty as your producer, who'd worked on every Scorsese and Lumet film and done all those. There was that history there, and then we were still, because in the 90s things were getting a lot more politically correct, a lot more nerfed, and a lot more safe, smoothed out. But because we were doing that, we were still doing like crazy 60s, 70s kind of filmmaking where there was some very bad behavior. Things that still, like, I've never seen its equal in my life, in my career. But at the same time, we were making art. We were making unquestionably art. We were making a show that lasts throughout the ages. And that's why we're so excited that finally everyone can see it again because it's on Peacock.
And that we can talk about it.
And
that we can continue to talk about it.
Well, you talked about local talent, and I'm watching the beginning, and I'm a big Levinson fan. And the guy who plays the down in the corner is the guy who was in Diner when he walks up and he goes, "Do you have this in black? I don't like color." And he walks out. I'm like, holy shit, because the guy's the 6 foot, but he kept recurring. So he was a guy. I mean, I don't know his name. But you know
Ralph.
what I'm talking about?
Ralph.
Tabakin.
Was he like that? Was he like a curmudgeon in real life? Or was that all acting?
Oh, Well, I don't know if he was a curmudgeon in life.
Yeah.
The guy, was he? Okay. Okay.
No, he
But-
wasn't. He wasn't a
the-
curmudgeon. He just, he had.
But the guy was the guy was an incredible human being who had a huge life before he met Barry, and he was like in the he was kind of I think he might have been a war hero. He had medals, and he had all this stuff. Yeah, and then he was an acting teacher in Baltimore, and then he found Barry because he was an acting teacher, and he brought his kids to come and watch him shoot something, and so Barry used him as his good luck charm. The cool thing about Ralph is that the other day I watched an episode. I don't know if you clocked this, Reed, but for the first time I've ever seen, he didn't have a clipboard with him, which meant that his lines were completely memorized. Now, Ralph notoriously always had a clipboard with him, and he was always reading his lines off the clipboard, but doing it brilliantly.
Just like George Clooney.
Just like George Clooney.
Oh, that's great.
Ralph is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's on Peacock. Now, here's my one complaint. I'm gonna give a little complaint. I want to know how you guys you're gonna do this on the show.
Yeah.
Peacock has some of the shows out of order. Like for you, Kyle, when you have the Sex in the Coffin. Okay, the Sex in the Coffin episode.
Yeah. Okay? I remember that.
I'm watching it. I'm watching the show, and that episode's on. And when Clark Johnson is hitting on her, he says, "My partner's dead." Well, I didn't know that. But then they put the Crescetti episode after that, because I went on to Wikipedia and I looked at the lineup of episodes, and it was different. Just like shooting date wise, Pop Gun with Robin Williams was shot earlier, but then they played for the finale. That may have played like that. But for me, it threw me off because I was sitting there watching it and I'm going, why haven't they said anything? Polito's gone. And then the next episode is when you guys, you do the funeral and all that stuff. But it was just weird. So when you go through, don't follow the Peacock exactly, because there's a few episodes that are off.
Boy, oh boy, I'm now a little bit surprised, but
we are too. Yeah.
Reed and I are only watching this episode by episode, and because the first 5 episodes were not out of order, they were in the order that they should be, and originally they were out of order when they first showed. Gosh, that's going to be. I didn't know that they put it out of order.
This is a revelation, because we assume that everything, because what had originally happened is when the DVDs were released, they were the episodes were in shooting order as opposed to airing order, because NBC aired things out of order to make splashier episodes for sweeps. So so far as we're doing the Peacock rewatch, because we're not getting ahead of ourselves, because we have a Herculean task ahead of us, but we're not getting out of order. We were assuming that Peacock was only going in the actual shooting order. So that's neat to know that something might be out of order. So
you're the first one to mention that to us.
And we'll give you full credit, Steve.
Because I watched it and I go, did I fall asleep on an episode?
But that would have been, you may have, Steve. No, this is that could have, two things could be true at the same time.
I went back and I said, wait a second. I'm like, why did they say Polito died? Then the next episode, so I had to Google it. And
causation is not
causation. Wikipedia, they have the original listing. I want to ask you, Kyle, what was it like shooting a scene having sex in a coffin? That was
amazing.
The most bizarre thing.
It was really sexy. That was really sexy. I had a great time. She was unbelievable. She's a really wonderful actress, and she was really sexy. And we had a ball. The director let us just go all out. The leading up to it, the falling in the coffin and all of that. And it was very, very cool. People bring up that episode an awful lot, not only for that, but then also for the follow-up where we do this thing where I rip off a store, a little convenience store at the end. But that was those 2 episodes were hilarious for me. I just had the biggest joy shooting those episodes. Yeah. No, I like coffin sex.
Yeah, I that's another thing. Now, as you said, Reed, you went to Juilliard with Andre. What was it like acting with him? Because he's so intense. I mean, his performance is amazing on that show. Like, it's just, you see it in his eyes. Did he come down off the camera, or was he always in that character? And as you said, you worked with him, you saw him in Othello, so you knew what his powers were. But what was it like? Because you were his partner. So what was it like working with him? Because he's such a dynamic and talented person, bless his soul, R.I.P. But what was it like working with him? Because it must have just been intense.
Is that?
That's you, buddy.
Oh, it
Yeah,
is for me. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's for you because you're his partner. Yeah.
Oh, right. Thank you, Reed. Yeah.
Hard because we're
Look,
in the triptych here. It's hard to see where everyone's looking, but
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that's you, buddy.
I
I'm
would say,
cross-eyed, so I could be looking at you.
I would say this is that oftentimes it was really intense, and he remained in it, but not in a methody way at all. It was just there was an energy that he was staying with, and he wanted to. If he did one take and he was in that energy, he wanted that. He wanted the next take and wanted to. That's why we didn't have makeup or hair was out of our way. We just go, let's get into the next take. Let's do it. Let's stay with that energy. Any other number of times, and maybe Reed, you can speak to this, is Andre would be the next, having a bag of Cheeto Lays or potato chips and joking and eating and then go right back into it. So he could be all over the place with that. He was so well prepared with his words, with everything that he wanted to do, that he was either going to stay in that energy for the time that he needed to, but if he didn't need to, he didn't take it off camera. He enjoyed being around crew and cast so much, and he would be playing chess or doing whatever, and then someone would say, "Hey, you're on next," and then he's into it. That's what I remember. He was a great. He was like the best kind of tennis partner to have. Truly,
He was formidable, right?
Yeah.
And I think we talk about this on the show, but in the movies, the old maxim was that the actor becomes the character, and on television, the maxim, which I learned on Homicide, was the character is the actor. And there are a lot of similarities between, especially as I do the rewatch, and I really sort of revisit things that I haven't seen in over 30 years. Seeing the character of Frank Pembleton, there's a lot of similarities to Andre. So I don't know which came first, chicken or the egg, right? So he had the ability to be quite funny, but he was never not the top. He was never not the alpha. So it's unquestionably, it was whenever you were in his presence, he let you know that he was on top. But what I loved about him, which is fun, as Kyle said earlier, about it's an ensemble show and we're fighting for storylines. We're also fighting, because you never know where the camera's going to be. We were fighting for screen time in this handheld world. And my most affectionate memory of Andre was he is the most inveterate and just prolific scene stealer I have ever encountered in my life. So the gauntlet was thrown down. So you knew, like, if you weren't bringing it, like if someone's going to show up with like their B game, you're toast. But even with your A game, I would clock. He's doing stuff behind me to try to still focus. Like he did this one thing. I have some monologue that's written, brilliant monologues written from you, either David Simon or Tom Fontana or Horace Zamacona or Julie, and he's just like taking a cigarette and just sniffing it. But it's so like he knows where the lens is, and he's trying to upstage me. But in the atmosphere of that show, that's what it needed. My favorite memory of Tom Fontana is before any emotional scene I had. If he was on set, he'd walk by me right before we were about to do a take. He's like, "Don't fuck it up." And that meant that wasn't like he knew I wasn't going to fuck it up. That was all about like there was a macho, and macho might not be the wrong. There was a prickliness and an intensity to that set that was essential. So everyone was in competition on some level in the way that their characters were in competition. And it was hard to see where reality and fiction ended and melded. So Andre was not a man to be trifled with, but he was a profoundly talented guy, could be hilarious. Some of the wrongest jokes I've ever heard came out of his mouth, things that I wouldn't be able to repeat. But also he had wisdom too. He was a family man. And the reason I left Fells Point, the reason I left 2 blocks away from that set was because he'd moved away. And I thought, I need to move away because I can't go to the bar every night and sustain this job for more years. So he was a profound influence as an actor, and but I can't say that I ever got to know him intimately.
Yeah, here's the thing: he didn't have to do much.
No,
that's the thing, is that he stole camera time by not doing much. There, he was in a scene in this last episode that we watched where he comes to my apartment and he knocks on the door, and I told Reed this. They just keep the camera on him over my shoulder. They don't bother to cut back to me or my reaction. All he's doing is telling me some information, and he's not doing anything. He's just standing there telling information. And I went, huh. Whatever I was doing was far less interesting than what he was doing. And Reed was saying that Tom would say to him, "Don't fuck it up," Jimmy Ashimura, who is one of our fabulous writers and producers, would come up to me constantly and he would say, "Do less. Just do less.
Do
just
less." That's so
stop
funny.
it. Stop it."
So
Can I tell you one funny story about Andre and me and Juilliard on the show?
Yeah.
So I get there, I get to the show, and I'm like, this is really my crucible for learning how to act on camera. I'd done a bunch of stuff. I'd had a few years in front of the camera, but I was still much more of a stage actor. I'm much more comfortable on stage. And I was still trying to find my way. Like I had an innate sense of how to act, but I would watch him, and Andre could do all of the Juilliard stuff where he could finish every sentence. He could say, "Get out of my blood." He could be absolutely Shakespearean and British and heightened, and it would work. And so one day I'm shooting, this is where all of my fantasies went away. I'm shooting with Clark, and Clark and I became really good friends. He was the perfect partner for me. And we're doing a scene. I'm like, and I said to the suspects, I'm like, "Get against the wall." And he's like, "What are you doing, man?" I'm like, "Well, Andre can do it." He's like, "Just do your thing, man." And I was like, "Okay, I'll just do my thing." Because I tried to be Andre.
Now, okay, I gotta ask, because his character is so imposing. What was it like working with Yaphet Kotto? Because he just looks like he comes across like so arrogant and headstrong in that role. What was it like working with him? Because he had been around for a long time, so you guys both knew his work and respected him. What was it like? Was he a giving actor, or was he sort of like, I guess not?
Look, give me so I got on
Reed loved him.
I got on Yaphet's good side on my first day working with him, because I told him, "You're my favorite Bond villain." No, he was a huge hero of mine. The man, and Kai will tell even better stories, but like, no, that man, he was a freaking genius. So he's one of the greatest actors of all time. And he and I stayed on good terms because on our first day working together, I told him how much I loved him and everything he'd ever done. And I named everything he had ever done. And I was like, "You were amazing across 110th Street. Oh my God, you were my favorite Bond villain. And my God, you in the Star Chamber, you blew Michael Douglas off the screen." And he's like, "Oh, I like you." But what he was really good at, because as we've talked about, and as you know, I was watching that show, it was all handheld and there was no coverage, there was no singles. And I watched that genius. I was going to say MFer, but that genius, he knew how to get a freaking close up. So he had 3 tricks. Number one, if we were in the box, he'd just go look out the window. So if he's looking out the window and delivering all of his scene out the window, you got to bring the camera on the other side to get him a single. The other one, which I learned early on, I was like, this guy can't learn his lines. He never knew his lines in the group scenes. And so they'd be like, "Okay, Yaphet, we didn't get you on all your lines. We'll put the camera on you." He'd be word perfect. And then his other favorite move was to be the head of the spear. So he would just walk. He would start walking, and you had to follow him. So the camera had to be in front of him because he was the tip of the spear. And I remember the one time I really pissed him off. I was like, it was probably my 3rd season there. I'm like, "Fuck this guy. I'm not following him again." Yeah. And so we're in the scene. He's like, "Kellerman, blah, 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 blah." And he just starts walking. And I just go to my desk and take a phone call because we had a real place and they might follow me too. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just like, you're going over there. I'm just going to make the phone call right now." And he's like, "Well, you have to follow me." I'm like, "Do I? I don't think so." But you had infinitely more. You were there from the get-go.
Well, here's the thing. I got to direct him. And so, right. Because I knew, I went, okay, I knew what I needed to do for certain actors in order to get them to stay on the set, because we had a door that swung a lot when we were all acting on the set, that when people were just slamming out the door, the people were constantly walking off the set. And Yaphet was one of those guys. And I knew what he wanted. I knew he wanted to be listened to as an artist. He wanted to get his take in that was just his idea. And so I went, okay. And it happened while I was directing. And I went, "Hey, Yaphet, let's do that idea that you have. What is it again? This. And I went, okay. And he said, then I turned towards the window, which is, of course, close one. That's a great idea. Let's use that. And we did it. And he was he was just a puppy for the rest of the shoot. My other Yaphet Kotto story is that on the very last day of filming, the first year that we were there, he called me up the day we were leaving, flying out. He said, Kyle, let's go and have breakfast at Jimmy's. I went, oh, okay, let's do that. I've never done that with you before. And we went and had breakfast at this place. And he said, listen, I'm trying to get married. I've got these mail order brides that I'm getting stuff from, like the Philippines and Russia. And he was going to do, so I went, oh, that's interesting. He said, yeah, because I can't find anyone in America. And I went, oh, okay. I thought, because that was, that's like internet dating is now. But then it was like these magazines with mail order brides. Wow. And a month later, I'm home and I go to my mailbox, and all of a sudden my mailbox is filling up with mail order bride magazines from Russia, Ukraine, the Philippines, and Yaphet somehow got my home address and had these magazines because he thought Kyle's on board with this, and he's sending them to my. That's it. That's my Yaphet Kotto.
What a mensch!
He was he was amazing.
Yeah.
Watching him now is such a lesson because he was so freaking powerful. And I had some scenes with him in the first couple episodes, and I'm so happy that those exist. Yeah.
Well, we have to wrap up soon.
Oh, all right.
No,
but you guys should come back down the road.
We're loquacious.
Let's do it.
Everybody, I want to hear both of you. Give me a few of your. We'll start with you, Reed. We'll start with you, Kyle, because you were there first. Give me a few of your fondest memories of your time on Homicide.
Oh, golly. A lot of them were Andre and I in those Cavaliers late at night when the camera had stopped rolling for a little bit of time and having these conversations. I can't even remember the conversations, but I just remember those were the moments where that's when the bonding started happening. I'll remember really funny stuff that Clark Johnson would do because he and I had a competition on the set for, we'd been there a long time, and we were like competing to get attention from any woman that was around, and he was always the best at that. And then Richard Belzer, and hanging out with him, going and have dinner with him, spending lots of time with him, and laughter, just laughter. There was a lot of laughter on that set. Mm-hmm. Reed, yeah, a lot of laughter. I mean, so many funny people on that set, and so those were my really fond memories. Although every time we do an episode, Reed, I remember more and more of them. Yeah. So listen to our podcast and you'll hear more of those types of memories.
And so, Reed, you give me a few memories they're fond to you, that you're very fond of.
Meeting me for the first time.
That's what I was going to say. Because look, here we are, man. It's hard as an actor to extricate your career from your life because they're one and the same and they inform each other. And you and I have talked about this before, Steve, but you never see it coming. And that's the weird. I've been doing this for 40 years and you don't know what's going to land and what's not going to land. And the fact that we're 30 years down the road, we're talking this, and Kyle and I are in this relationship that we didn't have in the 90s. We were friendly, we were cordial, and good scene partners. But the fact that this gift keeps on giving. I mean, look, I've said this a billion times. I'll never have a character. I hold every character to the height of Mike Kellerman. And then for me, I burst into tears. I remember crying when I knew I was leaving the show. And I left the show for creative reasons, because we got into this place, because in the way that television didn't allow you on network television, they'd created this situation where I was morally ambiguous. David Simon wrote a scene where I killed a drug dealer, and and I spent another year on the show, and I had to go. And I remember Tom Fontana, the genius creator of the show, who we'll have on our show very shortly. He's like, what do you want to do? And I just said, hey, man, I think we got to let Mike go because he can't sit at a desk for the rest of the show. And he goes, okay, but is it okay if I don't kill you? And I was like, yeah, that's great. Don't kill me. And I got to come back as a private investigator. But I remember sitting in my car after I shot what I thought was my last scene and just crying my eyes out in Fells Point, because I was never going to get to play Mike Kellerman again. And it had been the greatest gift of my life. But what's amazing is the gift keeps on giving, because here we are. Kyle and I are best buddies, and we get to hang out with you, Steve, and talk about this, and people still give a damn. And so you don't know, right?
Here, can I say one last memory with Reed? This is a pretty profound memory, and I don't know if I don't know everything. The screen may explode. We don't know, but Reed and I, we didn't know each other that well, right, Reed? Yeah. But I came back for the 5th season, and he and I were put together on this on the prison episode. And so the 5th season, when I came back, I was a bit of a problem on the set for the first 4 seasons. And I came back the 5th season and I was sober. And
why were you a problem? Why were you a problem?
I was just a cut up. No, let's see. Drinking and drugs. So that's why I was a problem. I wasn't a problem, acting or anything like that, but that was one of them. So I came back, and the first person that I told, because we happened to be going to get some lunch, as I recall, was Reed in a car with me. And I went, I'm going to tell this guy, and revealed to him. He was the first person that I ever said this to. And it was a huge thing because I was so uncomfortable. And I told him, and I remember his response was just to not go, oh my God, really? Thanks for telling me. He just listened, took it in, and was incredibly loving and very centered, which is what I needed. And so that to me was a huge memory that I had with Reed. And that's something that I always will remember. There you go.
Can't top that shit. That was
come on.
The sweetest.
That's how you end the show. So you told him that you were getting sober. Is that what you told him?
I told him that I was sober.
Yeah,
I was sober. Yeah,
I remember it, but it was like
why is he telling me? Why?
No, it wasn't even that. I was just honored. I was honored, but also it just didn't. I was like, I remember that experience, but I was just really happy. It wasn't shocking. I was like, this is great. I'm really happy for you. And so what I remember about Kyle too, and he and I've talked about this before. So I remember another sober story. So the next year we got together. He's like, we should go have dinner together. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go have dinner together. So because we were friendly, we weren't as intimate as we are now. And we're having dinner, and Kyle was like, he's in the 2nd year of his sobriety, and he's like, hey man, if you want to have a drink, you can have a drink. And I was like, oh, thanks, man. And do you want one of those non-alcoholic beers? And he said to me, non-alcoholic beers are for non-alcoholics. And I was like, oh. And I have never forgotten that. I was like, oh, I never even thought of that. So, and I literally have I only remember a few quotes in my life, but one of them was like, non-alcoholic beers are for non-alcoholics.
What a pain in the ass.
No, I love you. Look at you. You were great.
I want to thank you guys for coming on. Tell us where can we find the show? And hey, what's that mug you have? Hold that mug up.
Yeah, hold it up.
Kyle had a.
Yeah. I'm going to turn this around. Be aware.
Yeah. Ooh.
Boom.
Ooh, those handsome gents.
Send me one of them. I want one of them.
All right.
Get me one.
So you can find us. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on all podcasts. Homicide Life on Repeat. We are on YouTube. Homicide Life on Repeat. Our handle is at Homicide LOR. Homicide LOR, because we don't want to make you spell it out, because it's a lot of freaking words every time we got to write it. Homicide LOR. We're everywhere. Our 3rd episode is coming out this week, and
it's a goodie.
Oh, it's a goodie. We got so many goodies. It is turned into something so beyond, I think, anything we could have imagined. And it's an honor to share it with you, Steve. The reason for the season.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
Well, people, so go check out the show. Seriously, it is so good. The dialogue is amazing, and just the writing is phenomenal. And you don't need
you mean their show?
You don't need cell phones. You don't know the Homicide show, but watch their show. It's on YouTube. I watched it on my screen the other night, and I listened to it today. It's a very good show. Pleasant. And you can go to Comedy Trainwreck to see my past episodes, and there's a bunch of other shows on the network. Ed McGonigal has a great podcast. Coleman Green has a great podcast. Corey Alexander has a great podcast. They're all good shows. Jimmy Corhan does a kick-ass job. Also, you can go to coopertalk.net. That's my other podcast. I have 1,025 episodes up there. Oh, yeah. And if you're on YouTube, I host a business roundtable called the Coop Tank. I have 3 local business owners or business people from the Philadelphia area, and we talk about business. So keep on listening. go on, subscribe to Comedy Trainwreck, subscribe to Homicide, Life on Repeat. And people, I'm Steve Cooper. I'll talk to you next week.
Cooper's Comedy Corner.